So today, invited you to, it's not even an office hour, it's more of a Q&A because it's a very specific topic here. We're here to discuss, what you're missing using Vrbo iCal, of course, instead of the Vrbo API, right? So we expect you to use Vrbo since it is one of the main short-term rentals channels that in the market, and we have an excellent integration with them, right? So my name is Andrew. For those of you that don't know me, I'm here to support our clients that have issues, sharing best practices on how to get more reservations, more revenue coming from the channels or from direct reservations, right? So the reason we are here today is because many times I receive a request from clients or sometimes even a complaint, saying that things are not working on their integration, right? So they were told something, during the sales process, and then uh it doesn't perform. The dashboard does not perform as they expected, right? So I I invited you here to clarify any questions that you have. And of course, I only invited, some of the clients that were using or still using Vrbo iCall. So maybe you can ask questions and understand, the main difference, between one and another, right? Using Vrbo iCall or Vrbo API, right? So those are two different integrations to to Vrbo, and I'm going to cover that. And if you have any questions, we have a Q&A. Please, add your questions, right? And I'm also sharing a link uh, in a minute so that you can request a meeting, right? So if you need to go over your specific case, I'll be glad, to either go myself, or have someone from my team addressing, your questions related to that, or even assisting you to get the full connection with Vrbo API. Okay. So yeah. Since I mentioned full connection, what exactly, do I mean by full API, right? So there is a difference. If you use the iCall, it's only going to block the calendar, right? So it is a basic integration, of availability, right? It's a very specific thing. So it's a legacy method, right? So you can connect with any channel that doesn't have an API, which is not the case for Vrbo, right? They do have an API, and we do happen to have an excellent integration to their API, right? So, and I'm going to show you, main differences here, so that if you have any questions, we can cover them, right? So, if you intend to grow, right, and majority of the clients, that join Hostaway, they have that as an objective, right? It is a business, or they intend to get more reservations and be successful, on getting more reservations. The Vrbo API is a must, if you decide to go there, right? How can you define, how can you see on your dashboard if you're using Vrbo iCall or if you're using Vrbo API, right? So before I go, on the main differences, you can check that. So if you're not familiar with the terminology of Vrbo iCall or Vrbo API, if you open your channel manager, go to listing mapping, and you see connected as on here on Vrbo iCall, it's because your integration is only on iCall, right? So in the past, many people used to do that because it would be a quicker integration to Vrbo. But now they just updated their technology and it goes way faster, right? To have it integrated. So it's not an issue to have it integrated, right? It's very quick. And of course, we are here to support you on that, right? So if you haven't done it during your onboarding, because that's usually done during onboarding, not a problem, right? We can still assist you, right? So ideally, you should have this integration here, which means that you're using all the features that we have available on Hostaway with Vrbo as well, right? So, and maybe you're not aware. So this is the reason why we're here today, right? Maybe you're not aware on the difference, and maybe you need assistance, right? Or maybe you have questions. Well, so we can cover that. And as you notice, it is a short one, so it's only half an hour today because very specific. But if you need assistance, of course, our team is available for you, right? So we can schedule a call right after I'm sharing the links. So now, talk about rates and availability, right? So the synchronization for iCall, right? And when we are talking about synchronization exclusively on the calendar availability, right? So blocking the calendar or not blocking, it's not in real time, right? It takes some minutes, to push the information. It takes some minutes, for the Vrbo to come and collect this information, and vice versa, right? So if you get a reservation, on Vrbo side, it might take some minutes before this information is pushed, and some minutes before this information is collected. It is it is because of the type of technology, right? So this is how iCall works. So it is delayed. There are the intervals, and you can get the double booking, in the process, which is something that we try to avoid at all costs, right? So this it makes it riskier, right? So you can have outdated information. So if you have an API, is in real time, right? The update of your calendar availability is done in real time, much, much faster, right? And you can almost eliminate 100%, of a double booking, right? There is always a chance because when we are talking about seconds, as a coincidence, it might happen, but we will always assist you, if that happens. So, syncing critical financial data, right? Another thing that the Vrbo iCal does not do is bring financial data, right? So if you receive a Vrbo reservation on your Vrbo dashboard, right, and then you look on Hostaway and you don't see any data, financial data on that, yeah, don't be surprised. It is because of the type of integration that you're using, right? So if you're using Vrbo iCal, it's not going to pull that information, right? It's going to pull, I believe, the first name, and that's it, right? And the day of the check-in or the checkout, so it can block the calendar, right? That's the information that you can expect, right? And if you're using the Vrbo API, yeah, it brings all the financial data. It brings everything in real time. The rates as well, right? We haven't even talked about the rates, taxes, fees, pricing rules, right? So all the logic that you create on the dashboard, on your calendar, is also pushed to Vrbo if you're using the API, right? But if you're using the iCal, that's not happening, right? And it is expected, right? Because of the type of technology, right? So again, if you're the idea of having a channel manager PMS like Hostaway is to avoid to do the work several different times and going to different websites as much as possible, right? Sometimes, depending on the integration, that is not possible, but that's not the case with Vrbo, right? So you can do everything on Hostaway, and it will be automatically pushed to Vrbo and vice versa, right? If you get a reservation with financial data, it will be pulled all this information, the guest name, and all the financial data will also be pulled from Vrbo, right? So these are some of the details that are pulled over, right? So like gas details, payment information, reservation date, communication history, right? So if you want to communicate with the guest, the iCall will not allow you to do that, right? So you have to have a Vrbo API integration in order to have that. So as you can see, it is a very poor experience, right, compared to Vrbo API. Then manual updates. So yeah, you have every time you change the description, if you change the description on Hostaway, this information will be pushed to Airbnb, will be pushed to Google, will be pushed to Marriott, it will be pushed to you're directed to your website, but it's not going to be pushed to Vrbo, right? Because of if you're assuming that you're still using Vrbo iCal, right? If you're using Vrbo API, yes, everything goes automatically and it's being pushed, right? So media galleries like photos get updated, the amenities get updated, the pricing gets updated, right? So it is a lot of work that you don't have to go back and forth in doing things, right? Okay, I have here on the Q&A. Okay, Francisco, you would like assistance to get connected? Of course. So just let me share the link here with you. Actually, the question came from Francisco, but everybody else, that wants would like to have additional assistance. I'm sharing the link here in the chat. So you'll be able to find the link in the chat. So please just provide your email, your account ID, your name, and the reason. And it can be just verbal, right? It's just to help our team, to find you and get in touch with you, right? So then they can schedule a call and they can share, screen with you and guide you through the process. All right. So it's not a complex process at all. But anyway, it might be that you need help, right? So I don't have many slides here, many deck because it is. I believe by now you have already realized, the main difference, like workflow or having inbox centralized or not centralized, uh, scalability, right at the end of the day. If you need to grow your business, yeah, then I strongly recommend that you use Vrbo API, right? So I'm going to stop here, So real-time sync, full data sync, centralized management, communication, rates. So there are many advantages here. I believe you got the idea by now, right? So what I wanted to show you here is let me see. Let me see if I have reservation. Let me see if I have here. So farmers, Vrbo icon. See if I have any. Yeah, maybe the past. No, I don't have any. But anyway, well, what I wanted to show you is okay. I can share actually if I show any reservation like this one direct. You see that a verbal iCal will not have, this richness of data that you can have. Like, okay, all the breakdown, financial breakdown. You can also create your financial reports based on the information that is pulled over. So many of these things, right? Another thing that I wanted to show you, maybe, in case you want to understand, because sometimes, I have suppliers that prefer to first go over that, on their own and try to understand, best way to do it before requesting a meeting, right? So you can here to Vrbo, you can look for articles, you can look for how-to guides, right? And there are many articles, right? As you can see here. So you can always use Fin here, and you can ask. Let's say you don't want to schedule a call right now, but you would like to understand, how it works, right? Verbal integration. So you can ask the system, right? So we have an AI here that gives you the support. And if you're not satisfied, with the answer that you're getting, you can always request to speak to a human, right? So this is, but as you can see, it will bring like how to activate, export your listings, complete verbal onboarding, by clicking here on this link. So even though it is self-explanatory, you're very welcome, to request additional assistance, right? Because we have a team, and you might want to have a guided process. If you're the type of person, that prefers, okay, no, I rather read the manual, first, and then I talk to someone, that is also possible, right? So this is how you can go over. And of course, you can create a ticket. So there are many different ways, right? So you can go over this link here, sharing again, in case you missed. I'm sharing once again. So you can go over here and request assistance. So you can request the AI for assistance. You can go to the search results here, and then you can look for Vrbo specifically, right? And try to, let me see, Vrbo advantages of using, yeah, I, this article here, I created this article so you can read, in depth why, what is the difference between one and another. So there is a complete guide. I'm also sharing this guide here, just in case you're interested, to see the entire process, right? You want to understand on your own, how exactly this works. So there are many details, right? I don't want to spend too much time on the details because it is a huge difference, right, between Vrbo iCal and API. But I want to make sure that you are not mistakenly using one instead of another and expecting the best results, right? That we always promote, like having everything centralized in a single place, financial reporting, inbox, updating your rates, updating your calendar, right? Because this is not the way that is going to work, right? So I want to make sure that you understand that this is the full advantage of the software, right, is having the integrations, right? This is where our developers, they spend more time, working is on integrating with the channels, right? Because every time they change something, we change our software to make sure that we adapt, and you don't have to go to many different platforms, OTAs, right, to modify things, right? So you can get things done in a single place, in a centralized way, right? Like your communication, your financial reporting, everything in a single place, right? So share again. Do you have any other questions? Right. So I'm not seeing too many questions. I have, yeah, some of you have already requested, a call, have already completed the form. I appreciated that. So you'll be contacted by someone, from our team to assist you with that. And if you don't have any questions, I will I will close this office hours. Okay. I got a question here. It is mandatory to use Stripe in a full integration. Yeah, that's a very good question. So if you're using the full integration with Vrbo, you become the merchant of record, right? So this is if you go here, on settings, you can connect your Stripe account here, right? So then every single reservation, that you get from Vrbo, the credit card will be stored in your Stripe account, right? So that's why you need the Stripe to be connected to Hostaway, right? Because we do not keep the credit card inside Hostaway, right? We store the credit card in your account, so you have full control over the credit card. And of course, in the process, you can automate the charges so you don't have to charge manually, each one of the reservations. We can create auto charges here. like this one, with different rules, like 50% or 50%, or you can charge 100% at the moment of the reservation. You can select which properties each rule will apply. And there is this flexibility here, but you will become the merchant of record. So yeah, you must have control over the payment processing, on your side, right? So that's why Stripe is mandatory, right? So that you can process the payment, right? Otherwise, it would just mean a credit card, right? So, and it wouldn't be scalable, right? So that's why we have to have a payment processor connected. And they will also request you, from Stripe side, they will ask you if you have it, connected or not connected, right? Because if you come here, one of the items here, there are very few things that you need to do, but this is one of them, which is the form to complete your integration with Vrbo. And one of the questions that they're going to ask is, yes, if you have a payment processor in place, right? So meaning, are you capable of processing the payment? And you have to answer, right, if it is integrated or not, right? So they will only complete your integration, assuming that you have the capacity to process the payment. Okay, very good question. Thank you. All right, got another question here. Where can I see the financial information? So going back, maybe you missed this part here. So on the reservation, right? So the most granular piece of information that we have on financial side is the reservation itself, right? So on the reservation, here is where we can see the contact information that will come. Here we will see information about the channel, check-in date, checkout date, number of nights. Here we will see more information about cancellation, payout, status, if it is canceled, not canceled, if it is active. And then if you keep scrolling down, there is the payment section. Guess is if you're using the online check-in form, right? So this information will come here to guests. And then payment, right? Since we were talking about Stripe, this is where the information from payment will be displayed, right? So not fully displayed, right? So for example, a credit card, the credit card will be stored on your Stripe account, but the Stripe will share the four last digits of the card. It will be visible here. So you'll be able to see if there is a card associated with the reservation, right? And if it is the same card with the guest name, right? Because you also be able to see the guest name. And then, for example, this one here doesn't have a credit card, a payment method, right? You see here, it's empty, right? Of course, if you're managing a direct booking, you can always add that manually and add the information here, directly, right? But if you're managing a channel, they have already collected on Vrbo, they have already collected the gas credit card, right? So this information comes software to software, meaning that Hostaway will pick this information and store in your Stripe account, right? But you'll be able to see here that a credit card was collected, right? You'll not see full information for security reasons, of course, right? So you see only the last digits and the guest name that use the card, and you see the status of the payment. If it was paid, or when it was paid, when the transaction happened, it could be a manual transaction or it could be an automated transaction, right? So like I was showing before, maybe some of you missed and right a little later. So how do we get the transaction schedule? Of course, we can manually add here, but let's say you're growing, you're managing many listings, and this is not something that you would like to risk missing, charging a guest for their stay, right? So then we can have here on financial report I'm sorry, on guest payment, we can schedule that, right? So we can create an automated payment here, and then we can schedule the rules. Right. All right, got a question here, yeah, but how do I know if it is failed, if the guest doesn't pay? So, for example, we have here on message automation, we have a very common one that is checking instruction, for example. I will create a new one. I don't know how it was set before. So usually, many of my clients, they set like one day before arrival, they share the check-in instruction, or sometimes even on the same day, but a couple of hours before the check-in, right? How do you make sure that a guest that hasn't paid will not get into, you know, your place, right? So there are many different ways. First of all, I can create one automation that is not about the check-in, but every time the payment fails, an email is sent, right? And you can also add some additional emails here just to pay attention and to contact the guest and having a message like, hey, your payment didn't go through, please check that you're back, right? So this is one of the things that can be done. Now, as a safety measure, what I usually recommend, on the before sharing the check-in instructions is to add information like, for example, on payment status, right? So let's say you have here the door code, you have the full address of the property, things that you haven't shared before, the payment was completed, right? So you can make sure that you are only sharing this information, so the guest is only getting in the property if the reservation is paid, right? So this is something that you can take care of. If you can create another automation, for example, if it is unpaid, right, or partially paid, maybe we can do something like 2 days before arrival. So each one would be a separate automation, right? I'm just not changing the page here, but you have already been onboarded, so you understand how many automations we have. We can have as many as we want, right? So I would put like 2 days before guest arrival. If it is still not fully paid, I would send a reminder to the guest. Hey, sir, so, a dear guest, if you do not take care of the payment, I'm sorry, but I will not be able to share the check-in instructions with you, right? Some reminders. So you can use the negative triggers as well as the positive triggers, right? So sharing the check-in instructions would only go, if the guest has already completed the payment, right? So this is a question that I got. It's a very common question, and it is completely preventable, right, to receive someone that hasn't paid yet, right? Not receiving someone actually, right, and preventing them from accessing the property and without payment being completed, right? So you can have your rules like 100% of the payment at the moment of the reservation, right? Of course, it all depends on the demand that you have, in your region for your type of property. But if you have high demand, I have many clients, in that situation, you can even say like 100% of the reservation at the moment, of creation, right? So then you receive 100%. And even if someone is booking like 1 year in advance, you just got the full amount, at once, right? And then you can keep it until then. All right. So anyway, thank you for your questions. Sharing here once again. For those of you that arrive later, uh, here's the link. If you need additional assistance, I'll be glad to share with my team. And ask them to contact you, right? And to help you to complete the integration, right? Thank you very much for your time. And if you need anything, please, don't, you can use here, and then ask to escalate to a human being, or you can also create a ticket here, or you can call support. So we have many different ways, that you can get assistance, but we want to make sure, that you don't miss any opportunity. All right. And then we are there for you when you need it. All right. Thank you very much. See you next time.